The morning sun cast long shadows across the stone corridors of Kensington Palace. Princess Charlotte walked slowly through the familiar hallways, her small shoes making soft clicking sounds against the polished floors. At 9 years old, she had already learned many things about being a royal child. She knew how to wave properly, how to curtsy, and how to smile even when cameras flashed in her face. But today was different. Today, something inside her chest felt heavy and tight. She stopped near a tall window overlooking the palace gardens. The roses were blooming in shades of pink and red, their petals catching the morning light. Charlotte pressed her hand against the cool glass. Outside, she could see gardeners trimming hedges and tending to the flower beds. They moved freely, talking and laughing with each other. She wondered what that felt like, to move without someone always watching. Behind her, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. It was Miss Henderson, one of her tutors, coming to fetch her for morning lessons. Charlotte took a deep breath and turned around, putting on the smile she had practiced countless times. Miss Henderson smiled back, but Charlotte could see the schedule in her hands. Mathematics, followed by French, then history, then deportment lessons. Every minute of her day was planned by someone else. The morning passed in a blur of lessons and corrections. Sit straighter. Speak more clearly. Remember your posture. Charlotte tried her best, but her mind kept wandering. She thought about her older brother George, who seemed to handle everything with ease. She thought about her younger brother Louis, who was still young enough that people found his mistakes charming. But Charlotte felt stuck in the middle, expected to be perfect but never quite measuring up. During lunch, Charlotte sat at the long dining table in the palace dining room. Her parents were away on official duties, as they often were. She ate her meal quietly, using the correct fork for each course, dabbing her mouth with her napkin exactly as she had been taught. The staff members who served her food were kind, but they maintained a proper distance. Everyone did. After lunch came the part of the day Charlotte usually enjoyed most, outdoor time in the palace gardens. But today, even that felt different. Her protection officer, a serious man named Officer Davies, walked several steps behind her. He was always there, always watching. Charlotte understood why security was necessary. She had heard enough hushed conversations about threats and protocols. But sometimes she wished she could just run without someone timing how long she had been away from view. She found herself walking toward the old oak tree at the edge of the garden. It was her favorite spot, where thick branches created a canopy that felt almost like a separate world. Charlotte sat down on the wooden bench beneath it, pulling her knees up to her chest. For a moment, she let herself drop the perfect posture everyone always demanded. That was when the tears started to come. They surprised her at first. Charlotte had learned early in life that princesses were not supposed to cry in public. Crying was weakness. Crying was losing control. She had mastered the art of holding everything inside, of maintaining composure no matter what happened. But today something had broken loose. The tears rolled down her cheeks silently. She did not sob or make noise. Years of training had taught her to control even her crying. But the tears came anyway, blurring her vision as she stared at the grass beneath her feet. She felt so tired. Tired of being watched. Tired of being corrected. Tired of trying to be perfect when perfect seemed impossible to reach. Charlotte did not hear the footsteps approaching until they were very close. She quickly wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. But when she looked up, she saw someone unexpected. It was not Officer Davies or Miss Henderson, or any of the usual staff members who monitored her activities. Standing a respectful distance away was a royal guard she had seen before but never really noticed. He was younger than most of the guards, perhaps in his late 20s, with kind eyes and a gentle expression. His red uniform was perfectly pressed, his black bearskin hat held under one arm. Unlike the other guards who stood rigid and expressionless, this one looked at her with genuine concern. "Your Royal Highness," he said softly, bowing his head. "I apologize for the intrusion. I was walking my patrol route and noticed you seemed distressed." Charlotte froze. She had been caught crying. What would happen now? Would he report this to her parents? Would she be scolded for showing weakness? She tried to speak but found her throat tight with emotion. The guard seemed to sense her panic. He stayed where he was, not coming closer, giving her space. "Please do not worry, Your Highness. I simply wanted to ensure you were all right. If you prefer, I can leave you in privacy." Something about his voice was different from the others. There was no judgment in it, no disappointment, just simple human kindness. Charlotte found herself shaking her head. "Please do not go," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The guard looked surprised but nodded. He moved slowly, carefully, and sat down on the ground several feet away from her bench. It was a breach of protocol. Guards were not supposed to sit in the presence of royalty. They were not supposed to make themselves comfortable, but somehow this simple act made Charlotte feel less alone. "My name is James," the guard said quietly. "I have been serving at the palace for 2 years now. I see you sometimes during my rounds, always walking with perfect posture, always doing everything right." Charlotte wiped at her eyes again. "That is what I am supposed to do," James nodded slowly. "Yes, but doing everything right all the time must be very difficult." It was such a simple statement, but it unlocked something in Charlotte. No one had ever said that before. Everyone just expected her to manage, to cope, to be the perfect princess. No one had acknowledged that it was hard. "It is," Charlotte admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "Every single day is hard. Everyone watches me. Everyone judges me. If I make one mistake, everyone notices. I cannot just be a normal child. I cannot play freely or say what I think or even choose what I want to eat for breakfast. Everything is decided by someone else." James listened quietly, not interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a moment before speaking. "Your Highness, what you are carrying is a heavy burden for someone so young. I cannot pretend to understand what your life is like, but I can listen if you need someone to listen." Charlotte looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Here was someone offering her something no one else had. A chance to speak honestly without fear of judgment. She took a shaky breath, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, someone actually understood. Charlotte looked down at her hands, folded neatly in her lap just as she had been taught. The tears had stopped flowing, but her eyes still burned. She felt vulnerable sitting here with this guard named James, more vulnerable than she had felt in months. Part of her wanted to run back to the palace and pretend this conversation never happened. But a bigger part of her needed to speak. "Do you have children?" Charlotte asked suddenly, looking up at James. He smiled slightly and shook his head. "No, Your Highness. I am not married. But I have a younger sister about your age. Her name is Emma. She loves playing football and reading adventure stories. She makes mistakes all the time and no one thinks twice about it." Charlotte felt a pang of something sharp in her chest. Envy, perhaps. Or longing. "That sounds wonderful," she said quietly. "To make mistakes and have no one care." James shifted slightly, maintaining his respectful distance. "Everyone makes mistakes, Your Highness. Even guards. Last week I tripped during the changing of the guard ceremony. Nearly dropped my rifle. I was mortified." Charlotte's eyes widened. She had watched the changing of the guard many times. It always looked so perfect, so precise. "What happened?" "Nothing, really," James said with a slight shrug. "I recovered quickly. A few tourists probably noticed, but most people did not. My commanding officer gave me a look, but that was all. The world kept turning. But you are just a guard," Charlotte said, then immediately felt bad for how that sounded. "I mean, no one writes newspaper articles about you. No one takes photographs of every move you make." James nodded, understanding. "That is true. The scrutiny you face is different. But may I tell you something I have observed, Your Highness?" Charlotte nodded. "Most people are too busy with their own lives to judge you as harshly as you fear. Yes, there are photographers and reporters who watch your family closely. But the ordinary people, the ones who truly matter, they see a young girl trying her best. They see courage, not weakness." Charlotte wanted to believe him, but doubt filled her mind. "You do not understand. Every mistake I make gets discussed. Every time I look tired or sad in a photograph, people write stories about it. They say I am not adjusting well or that something is wrong with me. And does that change who you really are?" James asked gently. The question caught Charlotte off guard. She thought about it for a moment. "I do not know," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I do not know who I really am. I know who everyone wants me to be. I know the princess I am supposed to be. But underneath all the rules and expectations, I am not sure what is left." James was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "Your Highness, may I share a story with you? It is about my first day as a royal guard." Charlotte nodded, grateful for the distraction from her own thoughts. "I had trained for months to get this position," James began. "I practiced standing perfectly still for hours. I memorized every protocol and procedure. I was determined to be the best guard the palace had ever seen. On my first day, I was assigned to stand post at the main entrance. I stood there in my uniform trying to be absolutely perfect. He paused, a small smile crossing his face at the memory. About 3 hours into my shift, a little boy walked up to me. He could not have been more than 5 years old. He stood right in front of me and made funny faces, trying to get me to smile. I kept my composure, stayed perfectly still. Then his mother came to collect him and apologized. But as they walked away, I heard the boy say something. What did he say? Charlotte asked, drawn into the story. He said, "Mummy, I think that soldier is very sad because he cannot play." And that hit me hard, Your Highness. I realized that in trying to be perfect, in following every rule exactly, I had forgotten the purpose of what I was doing. I was not there to be a statue. I was there to protect people, to serve with honor. Being perfect was not the same as being good at my job. Charlotte absorbed these words. "So what did you do?" "I started allowing myself to be more human," James said. "I still follow the rules and maintain proper protocol, but I remember that I am a person, not a machine. When children wave at me, sometimes I give them the tiniest nod. When elderly visitors struggle with the stairs, I alert someone who can help. I do my duty, but I do it as a human being." Charlotte felt something shift inside her. "But it is different for me. You chose to be a guard. I did not choose to be a princess. No, you did not," James agreed. "That is perhaps the hardest part of your situation. You were born into a role you cannot leave. But Your Highness, you can still choose who you want to be within that role. You can follow the protocols while still remaining true to yourself." Charlotte shook her head, frustration bubbling up. How? How do I do that when every moment is controlled? When people tell me how to sit, how to speak, what to wear, where to go, I have no choices. James leaned forward slightly. You have more choices than you think. You cannot choose your circumstances, but you can choose how you respond to them. You cannot stop people from watching you, but you can decide whether their judgment defines you. You cannot eliminate the rules, but you can find small ways to make them your own. Like what? Charlotte challenged. Give me one example. James thought for a moment. All right. When you wave to crowds, you have been taught a specific way to do it, but no one can control the genuine warmth behind that wave. You can follow the form while adding your own heart to it. When you give speeches, you can use the approved words while speaking them in your own voice with your own feelings. Small things, Your Highness, but they matter. Charlotte considered this. It was true that sometimes when she waved, she tried to imagine she was greeting friends. It made the gesture feel less mechanical. I suppose, she said slowly, but it still feels like pretending. Is being kind while following rules pretending? James asked. Is finding joy in small moments pretending? I do not think so. I think it is survival. It is keeping your spirit alive even when circumstances are difficult. A breeze rustled through the oak tree leaves above them. Charlotte pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. James, can I ask you something? Of course, Your Highness. Why are you being so nice to me? Why are you taking this risk? You could get in trouble for sitting here talking to me like this. Guards are supposed to keep their distance. James met her eyes steadily. Because you are a child who needed help, and I am an adult who could offer it. Sometimes doing the right thing means bending the rules a little. I would rather face consequences for showing kindness than live with myself for walking away when someone needed support. His words struck something deep in Charlotte. Here was someone willing to risk his position just to make her feel less alone. It was the most genuine kindness anyone had shown her in a long time. Thank you, Charlotte whispered. Thank you for seeing me. Not Princess Charlotte, but just me. James smiled. You are welcome. And for what it is worth, I think the real you is quite brave. It takes courage to keep going when things are hard. It takes strength to cry when you need to instead of pretending everything is fine. Charlotte felt fresh tears threatening but held them back. I do not feel brave. I feel scared all the time. Bravery is not the absence of fear, James said softly. It is continuing forward despite the fear. And you do that every single day. The conversation beneath the oak tree continued for another 20 minutes. Charlotte found herself talking about things she had never spoken aloud before. She told James about the loneliness of living in a palace full of people. She described how it felt to have friends at school who could never fully understand her life. She admitted that sometimes she looked at ordinary families in public and felt an ache of longing for their normalcy. James listened to everything without interrupting or judging. He did not try to fix her problems or tell her she should be grateful for her privileged life. He simply listened, and that alone felt like a gift. But their private conversation could not last forever. The sound of footsteps approaching made them both look up. Officer Davies appeared around the corner of the garden path, his expression stern. "Your Royal Highness," he said with a bow, "it is time for your afternoon lessons. Miss Henderson is waiting." Charlotte felt the walls closing back in around her. The brief moment of freedom was ending. She stood up from the bench, automatically straightening her posture and smoothing her skirt. The princess mask was sliding back into place. James stood as well, quickly putting on his bearskin hat and coming to attention. He gave Charlotte a formal bow. "Your Royal Highness," he said in his official guard voice. But as Charlotte walked past him, he said something very quietly, so only she could hear. "Remember, you are braver than you know." Charlotte gave the tiniest nod and continued walking toward Officer Davies. As they headed back to the palace, she glanced over her shoulder once. James was still standing by the oak tree watching her go. Then he turned and continued his patrol route, disappearing around another garden path. The rest of the afternoon passed in its usual structured manner. Charlotte sat through a history lesson about the Tudor monarchs, trying to focus on dates and events while her mind kept drifting back to her conversation with James. She attended a piano lesson, her fingers moving through scales automatically while her heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. That evening at dinner, Charlotte sat with her family for the first time in several days. Her father, Prince William, had returned from his official duties. Her mother, Catherine, was asking George about his rugby practice. Louis was telling an animated story about something funny that happened at school. Charlotte picked at her food, observing the family dynamics with new eyes. She noticed how her mother gently corrected Louis's table manners without making him feel bad. She saw how her father listened patiently to George's concerns about an upcoming exam. Her family was not perfect, but they were trying. They were balancing the impossible demands of royal life while still trying to be human. "Charlotte, you are very quiet tonight," her mother observed. "Is everything all right?" Charlotte looked up and met her mother's eyes. Catherine's expression showed genuine concern. Charlotte realized that her mother probably understood more than anyone else what it felt like to have every move watched and judged. Catherine had married into the royal family, experiencing the same loss of privacy and freedom. "I am fine, Mum," Charlotte said automatically. Then she paused. She thought about what James had said about being honest within the rules. "Actually, I had a rather difficult day, but I am feeling better now." Her mother's eyes softened. "Would you like to talk about it later? Perhaps we could have tea together after dinner, just the two of us?" Charlotte nodded, feeling a small spark of hope. Maybe she did not have to carry everything alone. Maybe her mother could understand. After dinner, Charlotte and Catherine sat together in the smaller, more comfortable sitting room. Staff had brought tea and biscuits, then discreetly left them alone. Catherine poured the tea carefully and handed a cup to Charlotte. "So," her mother said gently, "tell me about your difficult day." Charlotte hesitated. She could not tell her mother everything. She could not mention crying in the garden or talking to a guard who broke protocol to comfort her, but she could share some of her feelings. "Mom, do you ever feel tired of being watched all the time?" Charlotte asked quietly. Catherine was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Every single day. Even after all these years, I sometimes want to scream at the cameras to go away and let me breathe." Charlotte was shocked by this admission. Her mother always seemed so composed, so capable of handling everything. "Really? But you always seem fine." "Seeming fine and being fine are different things," Catherine said softly. "I have learned to manage the public pressure, but that does not mean it is easy. There are days when I want to be just Kate again, not the Princess of Wales. Days when I want to go to the shops without security or plan my own schedule or make mistakes without the whole world discussing them." "Then how do you do it?" Charlotte asked desperately. "How do you keep going?" Catherine reached over and took Charlotte's hand. "I remember why I chose this life. I chose it for your father, for love. And now I continue for you and your brothers, for family. I find small joys in the midst of duty. A conversation with a friend, a quiet morning with my tea, watching you three grow and learn. These small moments sustain me." Charlotte felt tears welling up again. "But I did not choose this, Mum. I was born into it. And sometimes I feel like I am suffocating under all the expectations." Catherine squeezed her hand. "Oh, my darling. I know, and I am sorry. I wish I could change it for you. But you are stronger than you realize. You have a kind heart and a sharp mind. You will find your way through this." "I do not feel strong," Charlotte whispered. "I feel like I am failing all the time." You are not failing, Catherine said firmly. You are a 9-year-old girl dealing with extraordinary pressure. The fact that you get up every morning and face another day of scrutiny is remarkable. I am proud of you, Charlotte. So proud. These words, so simple but so powerful, broke through Charlotte's carefully maintained composure. She began to cry, and this time she did not try to stop the tears. Catherine pulled her into a hug, holding her close while she sobbed. Let it out, Catherine murmured. It is all right to cry. It is all right to feel overwhelmed. You do not have to be perfect, Charlotte. Not with me. They sat like that for a long time, mother and daughter, both understanding the unique burden they carried. When Charlotte's tears finally subsided, she felt drained but also somehow cleaner, as if crying had washed away some of the toxic pressure that had been building inside her. Mum, Charlotte said, pulling back slightly. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think it is possible to follow all the rules and still be myself? Catherine smiled sadly. It is difficult, but yes, I think it is possible. You find small ways to express who you are within the constraints. You hold on to your values even when others try to shape you. You choose kindness when you could choose coldness. You remain curious when you could become cynical. Little by little, you build a life that feels authentic even within impossible circumstances. Charlotte nodded slowly. Someone told me something similar today, that I have more choices than I think. That someone sounds very wise, Catherine said, and they are right. You may not be able to choose your role, but you can choose your character. You can decide what kind of princess you want to be. This idea fascinated Charlotte. What kind of princess do you think I should be? Not what I think, Catherine corrected gently. What kind of princess do you want to be? What matters to you? What makes your heart feel full? Charlotte thought about this. No one had ever asked her these questions before. I think, she said slowly, I want to be the kind of princess who helps people feel less alone, who understands what it is like to struggle, who is kind even when it is hard. Catherine smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. That sounds like a wonderful kind of princess to be. And Charlotte, you already are those things. You are kind and thoughtful. You notice when others are hurting. These are gifts, and no amount of protocol can take them away from you. Charlotte felt something settling inside her. Not all her problems were solved. She would still face difficult days and overwhelming pressure, but knowing her mother understood, knowing she was not alone in this struggle made everything feel more bearable. Thank you, Mum, Charlotte said, for listening, for understanding. Always, Catherine promised. Whenever you need to talk, I am here. We will navigate this together. The next morning brought new challenges, but Charlotte felt different approaching them. She woke early before her alarm and lay in bed thinking about the conversations from the previous day. Both James and her mother had told her essentially the same thing. She had more power than she realized. The question was how to use it. During breakfast, Charlotte made a small decision. When the staff asked what she wanted to eat, she did not just accept whatever they suggested. She asked for scrambled eggs with toast, her actual favorite, instead of the porridge that was supposedly healthier. It was tiny. It was barely worth noticing, but it felt like a crack in the wall of control others had over her life. Miss Henderson arrived promptly at 8 o'clock for morning lessons. But before they started, Charlotte did something she had never done before. She spoke up. Miss Henderson, she said politely, may I make a request about today's schedule? Miss Henderson looked surprised but nodded. Of course, Your Highness. What is it? I wondered if we might spend some extra time on literature today instead of deportment lessons. I've been reading a wonderful book about Eleanor Roosevelt, and I would love to discuss it. Miss Henderson's eyebrows rose. Charlotte held her breath, waiting for rejection, but instead her tutor smiled. That sounds like an excellent idea. I think we can rearrange the schedule. Tell me about what you are reading. It was that simple. Charlotte had asked for something she wanted, and she received it. The small victory made her feel braver. During their literature discussion, she shared her thoughts about Eleanor Roosevelt's courage in speaking out for people who had no voice. Miss Henderson listened thoughtfully and asked questions that made Charlotte think even deeper. You seem more engaged today, Miss Henderson observed as they finished the lesson. More present, if that makes sense, Charlotte nodded. I feel more present. Thank you for being flexible about the schedule. Over the next few days, Charlotte began testing small boundaries. She asked to take slightly longer walks in the garden. She requested books from the library that interested her, rather than just reading what was assigned. She spoke up during lessons when she disagreed with something instead of staying silent. Each small act of self-determination felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. But the real test came a week later when the family had a public engagement. They were visiting a children's hospital, something Charlotte had done several times before. Usually these visits made her anxious. She worried about saying the right things and making proper impressions. She felt the weight of cameras capturing every moment. This time Charlotte decided to focus on something different. She remembered her mother's words about choosing what kind of princess to be. She wanted to be someone who helped others feel less alone. That meant actually connecting with the children she met, not just performing for the cameras. At the hospital, Charlotte met a girl named Sophie, who was 8 years old and recovering from a serious illness. Sophie seemed nervous and quiet, overwhelmed by the royal visit. Charlotte recognized that feeling immediately. "The cameras are quite intense, are they not?" Charlotte said quietly as they sat together in the hospital playroom. Sophie nodded, eyes wide. "I do not like being stared at." "Neither do I," Charlotte admitted. "It makes me feel like I cannot be myself." Sophie looked surprised. "Really? But you are a princess. I thought you would be used to it." "Being used to something does not mean liking it," Charlotte said. She glanced around at the photographers and decided to take a risk. "Would you like to know a secret?" Sophie leaned in, intrigued. "Yes. Sometimes when I have to smile for photos, I imagine I am somewhere else entirely. Somewhere peaceful and quiet. It helps me feel calmer inside even when everything outside is chaotic." "Where do you imagine?" Sophie asked. "Usually I think about sitting under my favorite oak tree in the garden. There's a bench there, and when I sit on it I can hear birds singing and feel the breeze. It is my special place." Sophie smiled for the first time. "I have a special place too. It is my bedroom at home. I have fairy lights on the walls and stuffed animals on my bed. When I'm here in the hospital I close my eyes and imagine I am there." "That sounds lovely," Charlotte said genuinely. "I hope you can go home soon." They continued talking and Charlotte forgot about the cameras. She forgot about protocol and proper behavior. She just talked to another child who understood what it felt like to be in a difficult situation. When it was time to leave, Sophie hugged her. It was spontaneous and against protocol, but Charlotte hugged her back. That night, photographs of Charlotte with Sophie appeared online and in newspapers. Some of the comments criticized her for breaking protocol by hugging a patient, but many more praised her for showing genuine warmth and connection. Charlotte read a few of the articles with her mother. "Some people are angry about the hug," Charlotte noted, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Some people will always find something to criticize," Catherine said calmly. "But look at these other comments. Look at what Sophie's mother said." Charlotte read the quote from Sophie's mother. "Princess Charlotte made my daughter smile for the first time in days. She treated Sophie like a real person, not just a photo opportunity. We are so grateful for her kindness. That," Catherine said, "is what matters. You made a genuine connection with another child. You offered comfort to someone who needed it. That is far more important than following a rule about physical contact." Charlotte felt a warm glow in her chest. She had chosen kindness over protocol, and it had made a real difference. This was what James meant about making choices within her role. This was what her mother meant about deciding what kind of princess to be. But not everyone was pleased with Charlotte's growing independence. A few days later, there was a meeting with senior royal advisors. Charlotte was not present, but she heard about it afterward from her mother. "Some of the older advisors are concerned," Catherine explained as they walked in the garden together. "They think you are becoming too independent, too willing to break protocol. They want to implement stricter controls on your behavior." Charlotte felt panic rising in her chest. "What does that mean? More rules? More restrictions?" "Your father and I are handling it," Catherine assured her. "We have made it clear that you are a child who needs room to grow, not a puppet to be controlled. But Charlotte, I need you to understand something. Change is difficult for many people. The royal family has operated in certain ways for centuries. When you push against those traditions, even gently, it makes people uncomfortable." "So I should stop?" Charlotte asked, disappointed. "Go back to being silent and obedient?" "Absolutely not," Catherine said firmly. "You should continue being yourself, continue making thoughtful choices. But you need to be strategic about it. Pick your battles, push boundaries on things that truly matter, and compromise on things that do not. It is a balancing act." Charlotte thought about this. How do I know which things truly matter? That is something only you can decide, Catherine said. But I can tell you what has guided me over the years. I push back on things that affect my core values or the well-being of my family. I compromise on things like fashion choices or event schedules. I save my energy for fights that really count. This made sense to Charlotte. She could be strategic rather than just rebellious. She could choose her moments carefully. Mom, Charlotte said hesitantly, there is something I want to ask you about. Something that happened last week. Catherine looked at her with interest. Go on. Charlotte took a deep breath. She had been thinking about James and their conversation under the oak tree. She had been wondering if she should mention it, if doing so might get James in trouble. But keeping it secret felt dishonest, and she wanted to be honest with her mother. Last week, when I was upset in the garden, one of the guards stopped to talk to me. He was kind and helped me feel better, but he broke protocol by sitting down and having a conversation with me. I do not want him to get in trouble, but I also wanted you to know because it mattered to me. Catherine was quiet for a moment. What is this guard's name? James, Charlotte said quietly, bracing herself. To her surprise, Catherine smiled slightly. James Morrison. Yes, I know who he is. He is one of the younger guards, known for being conscientious and kind. Charlotte, do you know what I think about what he did? Charlotte shook her head, afraid of the answer. I think he showed good judgment and compassion. He saw a child in distress and offered comfort. That takes courage, especially when it means bending rules. I am not going to report him. In fact, I'm glad he was there for you. Charlotte felt relief flooding through her. Really? You are not angry? Not at all. Sometimes rules need to be broken for the right reasons. James understood that kindness was more important than protocol in that moment. I respect that. Charlotte hugged her mother spontaneously. Thank you for understanding. Always, Catherine said, holding her close. And Charlotte? If you ever need to talk to James again, you can. I trust your judgment about who to confide in. This permission felt like another gift of freedom. Charlotte had allies in her corner. People who understood what she needed even when it did not fit traditional expectations. 2 weeks passed and Charlotte continued her careful navigation between duty and authenticity. She attended formal events with proper deportment, but found small ways to connect genuinely with people she met. She followed her lesson schedules but asked thoughtful questions that pushed discussions deeper. She was still a princess, still bound by countless rules, but she was learning to breathe within those constraints. Then came an unexpected announcement. The royal family would be traveling to Scotland for a week-long visit to Balmoral Castle. It was an annual tradition, but this year would be different. The palace had decided to include more public appearances than usual, including visits to local schools and community centers. Charlotte felt mixed emotions about the trip. She loved Balmoral itself. The castle felt more relaxed than Kensington Palace, surrounded by beautiful Highland landscapes. But the increased public appearances worried her. More events meant more pressure, more cameras, more chances to make mistakes. The night before they left, Charlotte found herself unable to sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with worries. What if she said something wrong during a school visit? What if she tripped in front of photographers? What if the Scottish people did not like her? The old familiar anxiety was creeping back, threatening to overwhelm the confidence she had been building. Finally, she got out of bed and walked to her window. The palace gardens were dark except for security lights along the paths. She could just make out the shape of her oak tree in the distance. She wondered if James was on duty tonight making his patrol rounds. As if her thoughts had summoned him, she saw a figure in a red uniform walking along one of the garden paths. Even from this distance, she recognized James's stride. Without really thinking about what she was doing, Charlotte grabbed her dressing gown and slippers and quietly left her room. She knew the palace well enough to avoid the main corridors where night staff would be working. She took a back staircase down to a side door that led to the gardens. Her heart pounded as she stepped outside. She had never done anything like this before, sneaking out in the middle of the night. If someone caught her, there would be serious consequences. But she kept walking, drawn toward the path where she had seen James. The night air was cool against her face. Above her, stars glittered in the dark sky. For a moment, Charlotte felt completely free. "Your Royal Highness?" Charlotte jumped at the voice behind her. She turned to find James standing there, his expression shocked. "What are you doing out here?" "It is past midnight." "I could not sleep," Charlotte said simply. "I saw you from my window and thought perhaps we could talk again." Like we did before? James looked around nervously. Your Highness, this is not safe. If anyone sees you out here alone at night, there will be serious trouble. For both of us. I know, Charlotte admitted. But James, I am leaving for Scotland tomorrow and I am terrified. All my old fears are coming back and I needed to talk to someone who understands. James's expression softened. He looked torn between duty and compassion. Finally, he made a decision. All right, but not out here in the open. Follow me. He led her to a small garden shed near the greenhouse. Inside were tools and supplies, but also a small bench where the gardeners took breaks. James lit a lantern that hung on the wall, casting a warm glow over the space. This is highly irregular, James said, but he was smiling slightly. If anyone finds out I brought you to a garden shed in the middle of the night, I will definitely be fired. I will not tell anyone, Charlotte promised. I just needed to talk. They sat down on the bench and Charlotte poured out her worries about the Scotland trip. James listened patiently, just as he had before. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Your Highness, do you remember what we talked about last time? About how you have more choices than you think? Charlotte nodded. Well, I have been thinking about that conversation too, and I realized that I gave you advice without really explaining how to apply it practically. So let me try to do better this time. James leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. When you go to Scotland, you will face many situations that make you anxious. That is natural, but in each situation, you can make a choice about where to put your focus. You can focus on all the things that might go wrong, or you can focus on the opportunity to connect with people. But what if I do something wrong? Charlotte asked. Then you will have done something wrong, James said simply, and the world will continue spinning. Your Highness, I have watched you from a distance over these past weeks. Do you know what I have noticed? Charlotte shook her head. I have noticed that you are trying so hard to be perfect that you forget to be present. During that hospital visit, the photograph showed something different. They showed you actually engaging with that girl Sophie, actually being in the moment rather than worrying about the moment. That is when you were most genuine, and ironically, that is when you were most princess-like. Charlotte absorbed this. So you are saying I should stop trying to be perfect? I am saying that perfection is impossible, so striving for it is pointless. Instead, strive for presence. Strive for kindness. Strive for authenticity. Those things are achievable and they matter far more than never making mistakes. That sounds good in theory, Charlotte said. But how do I actually do it when I am standing in front of cameras and crowds? James thought for a moment. Can I teach you a technique that helps me? When I am standing post and feeling overwhelmed, I use something called grounding. It is simple. You focus on your 5 senses, one at a time, to bring yourself into the present moment rather than spinning in anxious thoughts. How does it work? Charlotte asked, intrigued. All right, let us try it now. Close your eyes. Charlotte closed her eyes, feeling slightly silly but trusting James. First, notice what you can hear. Do not judge the sounds, just notice them. What do you hear right now? Charlotte listened. I hear wind in the trees. I hear you breathing. I hear a distant sound, maybe a car on the road outside the palace grounds. Good, now what can you feel physically? Notice 3 things you can touch or feel. Charlotte focused. I feel the wooden bench under me. I feel my dressing gown against my skin. I feel the cool air on my face. Excellent. Now open your eyes. What can you see? Name 3 things. Charlotte opened her eyes and looked around the small shed. I see the lantern light. I see garden tools hanging on the wall. I see your uniform buttons reflecting the light. Perfect. Now what can you smell? Charlotte sniffed. Earth, wood, maybe lavender from the gardens. And finally, what can you taste? Charlotte thought about it. I can still taste the toothpaste from brushing my teeth before bed. James smiled. There. You have just spent a full minute completely in the present moment, focused on your actual experience rather than your worried thoughts. How do you feel? Charlotte realized with surprise that her anxiety had lessened. Calmer, more here. That is grounding, James explained. You can do this anytime, anywhere. When you are standing in front of crowds in Scotland and feeling overwhelmed, you can quickly ground yourself. Notice the sound of people talking, the feel of your shoes on the ground, the sight of genuine faces looking at you. It will pull you out of panic and into presence. Charlotte nodded slowly. Can I practice it more? Absolutely. In fact, I recommend practicing it every day, even when you are not anxious. That way, it becomes automatic when you need it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Charlotte asked, James, why do you care so much about helping me? You have risked your job twice now. James looked at her seriously. Because I believe that how we treat children, especially children under pressure, says everything about who we are as people. You are carrying a burden no child should have to carry. The least I can do is offer you some support and kindness. Besides, I have a younger sister, remember? If Emma were struggling, I would hope someone would help her. Your sister is lucky to have you, Charlotte said softly. And you are braver than you give yourself credit for, James replied. You came out here in the middle of the night to ask for help. That takes courage, Charlotte smiled slightly. Or foolishness. Sometimes courage and foolishness look very similar, James said with a grin. But I prefer to think of it as courage. Now I should get you back inside before anyone notices you are gone. Can you make it back to your room safely? Charlotte nodded. I know the way. James walked her to the garden door she had used. Before she went inside, he said quietly, Your Highness, remember in Scotland that you do not have to be perfect. You just have to be kind and present. That is enough. Thank you, James, Charlotte said, for everything. She slipped back inside and made her way to her room without being seen. As she climbed back into bed, she felt different. Still nervous about Scotland, but equipped with new tools to handle that nervousness. She practiced the grounding technique once more, focusing on the feel of her pillow, the sound of the old palace settling, the sight of moonlight through her window. She fell asleep more peacefully than she had in weeks. The journey to Scotland began early the next morning. Charlotte sat in the car between George and Louis, watching the countryside pass by. Her brothers were excited, talking about hiking and exploring the Balmoral grounds. Charlotte tried to share their enthusiasm, but her stomach felt tight with nervousness. When they arrived at Balmoral Castle, Charlotte felt some of her tension ease. The castle stood majestic against the highland landscape, surrounded by forests and mountains. The air smelled different here, cleaner and sharper. She could hear a river rushing somewhere nearby. The first few days were private family time. Charlotte hiked with her father through the forests, learning about the different trees and wildlife. She helped her mother in the castle kitchen, making traditional Scottish shortbread. She played games with her brothers, their laughter echoing through the old stone halls. For those brief days, she was just Charlotte, not Princess Charlotte. But then came the first public engagement. They were visiting a local primary school in a nearby village. Charlotte woke that morning with her old familiar dread returning. She went through the motions of getting ready, putting on the outfit that had been selected for her, allowing staff to arrange her hair properly. In the car on the way to the school, her mother noticed her silence. Are you all right, darling? Catherine asked quietly. Charlotte wanted to say yes automatically, but she remembered her promise to be more honest. I am nervous, she admitted. What if I say something wrong? What if the children do not like me? They will like you if you are yourself, Catherine said. Remember, these are just children like you. They probably feel nervous too, meeting royalty. Your kindness will put them at ease. Charlotte nodded but did not feel convinced. When they arrived at the school, she saw crowds of people lining the street. Cameras flashed. People called out greetings. Charlotte felt the familiar panic starting to rise. Then she remembered James's grounding technique. As she stepped out of the car, she focused on her senses. She heard the Scottish accents of the crowd, so different from London voices. She felt the cool Highland breeze on her face. She saw genuine smiling faces, not just cameras. The panic lessened slightly. Inside the school, Charlotte and her family were shown to a classroom where children around her age were waiting. The teacher introduced them, and Charlotte saw that many of the children looked as nervous as she felt. One little girl in particular caught her attention. She stood at the back of the group, eyes wide, looking terrified. Charlotte made a decision. Instead of standing with her parents and brothers, she walked over to the nervous girl. Hello, she said gently. My name is Charlotte. What is your name? The girl's eyes got even wider. I am Isla, your Royal Highness. You can just call me Charlotte, Charlotte said. Are you feeling nervous? I am nervous too. Isla looked surprised. You are nervous, but you are a princess. Being a princess does not mean I do not get nervous, Charlotte said honestly. In fact, I think I get nervous more than most people because everyone is always watching. It is quite overwhelming sometimes. Isla relaxed slightly. I was so worried about meeting you. I did not want to say anything wrong or do something stupid. Charlotte smiled. I worry about that all the time. But shall I tell you a secret? Most people are too busy worrying about themselves to judge us as harshly as we fear. We are probably our own worst critics. They continued talking, and soon other children joined the conversation. Charlotte found herself genuinely engaged, asking about their favorite subjects, their hobbies, their lives in Scotland. She forgot about the cameras and the pressure. She was just talking to other children, finding common ground. When it was time to leave, Isla hugged Charlotte.
"Thank you for being so nice," she whispered.
You are not like what I expected. What did you expect? Charlotte asked curiously. Someone formal and distant, but you are kind and real. Those words stayed with Charlotte as they drove back to Balmoral. Real. That was what she wanted to be. She had worried so much about being perfect that she had forgotten the value of being real. Over the next few days, there were more engagements. Charlotte visited a community center where she met elderly residents and heard their stories. She toured a Highland Games event where she tried her hand at traditional Scottish dancing, laughing when she missed steps. She visited a conservation project and learned about protecting Scottish wildlife. At each event, Charlotte used the grounding technique when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. And at each event, she focused on genuine connection rather than perfect performance. Something remarkable happened. The more real she allowed herself to be, the more positive the responses became. One evening, her father called her into his study. Charlotte's heart sank. Had she done something wrong? Had her attempts at authenticity crossed some line? But when she entered, William was smiling. "Sit down, Charlotte. I want to talk to you about something." Charlotte sat nervously, hands folded in her lap. "I have been watching you this week," William said, "and I have noticed a change. You seem more confident, more comfortable in public appearances. Your mother and I have been very impressed." Charlotte felt relief wash over her. "Really?" "Really. More than that. The feedback from the people you have met has been overwhelmingly positive. They appreciate your warmth and authenticity. One woman at the community center said you reminded her of Princess Diana in the best possible way." Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes at the comparison to her grandmother she had never met but heard so much about. "That means a lot to me." William studied her thoughtfully. "Something has changed in you recently. You seem less burdened, more yourself. Can you tell me what happened?" Charlotte hesitated. She could tell her father about James and their conversations. But she worried about getting James in trouble. At the same time, she wanted to be honest with her father. "I learned something important," Charlotte said carefully. "I learned that trying to be perfect was making me miserable and actually making me less effective as a princess. Someone helped me understand that I could follow the rules while still being genuine, that kindness and presence matter more than perfection." William nodded slowly. "That is wise advice. Who gave it to you?" Charlotte took a breath. "A palace guard named James. He saw me crying in the garden one day and stopped to talk to me. He broke protocol, but his kindness helped me more than any rule could have." She waited for her father's reaction. Would he be angry? Disappointed? Instead, William smiled. "James Morrison. Yes, I know him. He is a good man. And Charlotte, I am glad he was there when you needed help. Sometimes the most important acts of service come from people breaking rules for the right reasons." Charlotte felt shock. "You are not angry?" "Why would I be angry? Someone showed my daughter compassion when she needed it. I am grateful. In fact, I think I should thank him personally." "Please do not get him in trouble," Charlotte said quickly. "I have no intention of getting him in trouble," William assured her. "Quite the opposite. But Charlotte, I want you to know something. Your mother and I have been discussing how to help you navigate royal life in a healthier way. We have been too focused on preparation and protocol, not enough on your emotional well-being." He paused, then continued. "We are going to make some changes when we return to London. Fewer public engagements, more private time, more flexibility in your schedule. We want you to have room to be a child, not just a princess." Charlotte felt overwhelming relief. "Thank you, Papa, that would help so much." William pulled her into a hug. "I am sorry we did not see earlier how much pressure you were under. We should have been paying closer attention. But I am proud of how you handled it. You found your own way through with some help from kind people. That shows remarkable strength." That night, Charlotte wrote in her journal for the first time in weeks. She wrote about the events in Scotland, about the children she had met, about her conversation with her father. She wrote about feeling like she was finally finding a balance between duty and authenticity. The next day brought one final public engagement before they returned to London. It was a visit to a children's hospital in Aberdeen, similar to the hospital visit where Charlotte had met Sophie. Charlotte woke feeling calm, ready to face the day with presence and kindness rather than anxiety about perfection. The Aberdeen hospital visit was scheduled for late morning. Charlotte dressed in a simple blue dress, comfortable shoes, and minimal accessories. She had learned that children responded better to approachability than formality. As their car pulled up to the hospital entrance, Charlotte used her grounding technique one more time, preparing herself mentally. The hospital staff greeted them warmly and led the family through the pediatric ward. Charlotte could see children in various states of recovery. Some were in wheelchairs. Others had IV lines attached. A few wore brave smiles despite obvious discomfort. Charlotte felt her heart ache for them. They stopped first at the bedside of a young boy named Callum who was recovering from a serious accident. He looked about 7 years old with bandages on his arms and a cast on his leg. When he saw Charlotte, his eyes lit up with excitement. "Are you a real princess?" he asked in his thick Scottish accent. Charlotte smiled and sat carefully on the edge of his bed. "I am. My name is Charlotte." "What is your name?" "Callum. I fell off my bike and broke lots of bones. But I am getting better." "That must have been scary," Charlotte said sympathetically. "Are you in much pain?" Callum shrugged with the bravery only children can manage. "Sometimes. But the nurses are nice and my mum brings me sweets when the doctors are not looking." Charlotte laughed genuinely. "That sounds like something my mother would do too." "What do you like to do when you are not in hospital?" They talked about football and video games in school. Charlotte was completely present in the conversation, not worried about cameras or saying the right things. She simply connected with a child who needed distraction from his pain. As they moved through the ward, Charlotte met more children. There was Freya, a teenage girl fighting cancer who loved art and showed Charlotte her sketches. There was twin boys named Connor and Craig who had been in a car accident and competed to tell Charlotte the funniest jokes. There was a little girl named Maisie who was too shy to speak but held Charlotte's hand tightly. With each child, Charlotte was authentic and present. She did not pretend everything was fine or offer empty platitudes. She acknowledged their struggles while celebrating their strength. She listened more than she spoke, and she found that the more genuine she was, the more the children opened up to her. In one room, Charlotte met a girl named Eilid, who was 12 years old and had been in the hospital for weeks with a serious illness. Unlike the other children, Eilid seemed withdrawn and sad. She barely looked up when Charlotte entered. Charlotte sat down next to her bed. "Hello, Eilid. My name is Charlotte." Eilid glanced at her briefly. "I know who you are." "You do not seem very impressed," Charlotte said gently with a slight smile. "No offense," Eilid said quietly. "But being a princess seems easier than being stuck in a hospital bed." Charlotte considered this. She could have been offended or defensive. Instead, she chose honesty. "You are right. What I deal with is nothing compared to what you are going through. Being in hospital must be incredibly difficult." Eilid looked surprised by this response. "Most people tell me to stay positive or say everything will be fine. They do not admit that this is horrible." "It is horrible," Charlotte agreed, "and I think it is okay to acknowledge that. You do not have to pretend to be brave all the time." For the first time, Eilid really looked at Charlotte. "Do you have to pretend to be brave?" Charlotte nodded. "All the time. Everyone expects me to always smile and be perfect. Sometimes I just want to cry or be angry or admit that I am scared, but people do not want to see that from a princess." "That sounds lonely," Eilid said softly. "It is," Charlotte admitted. "Very lonely sometimes. But I am learning that it is okay to be honest about struggles. Pretending everything is fine does not make it fine. It just makes you feel more alone." Eilid was quiet for a moment. "I have been pretending for my parents. They are so worried about me. I smile and tell them I am okay so they will not feel worse. But inside I am terrified." Charlotte reached out and held Eilid's hand. "I think your parents would rather know how you really feel." "They probably sense you are pretending anyway. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for people who love us is let them support us in our struggles." Tears started rolling down Eilid's cheeks. "I am so scared I am not going to get better." "That is a completely understandable fear," Charlotte said gently. "I cannot promise you everything will be fine. I do not know what will happen. But I can promise you that you do not have to go through this alone. Your parents love you. The hospital staff is working hard to help you, And you do not have to be brave every single moment. You can be scared and sad and angry. All of those feelings are valid. Eyelid squeezed Charlotte's hand. Thank you for being honest with me. Everyone else treats me like I am fragile. You are strong enough to handle honesty, Charlotte said, and you are strong enough to ask for help when you need it. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. They talked for a few more minutes before Charlotte had to move on to the next room. But as she left, Eyelid called out to her. Charlotte, thank you for seeing me. Not just Princess Charlotte doing a hospital visit, but really seeing me. Charlotte felt tears in her own eyes. Thank you for seeing me, too. The visit concluded with a brief meeting with hospital staff and some photographs. As Charlotte stood smiling for the cameras, she felt different than she had at previous events. She was not performing. She was simply being herself after having done something meaningful. On the drive back to Balmoral, her mother squeezed her hand. That was beautiful, Charlotte. The way you connected with those children, especially Eyelid, you gave them something more valuable than a royal visit. You gave them genuine human connection. Charlotte felt proud but also humbled. I just tried to be real with them, to treat them like people, not charity cases. That is what your grandmother Diana did best, William said from the front seat. She saw people's humanity first, their circumstances second. You have that same gift. That evening, Charlotte took a walk in the Balmoral grounds alone.
Well, not entirely alone.
Officer Davies followed at a discreet distance. But for the first time, his presence did not feel oppressive. It simply felt like part of her reality. She thought about everything that had happened over the past few weeks. The crying breakdown in the garden, meeting James, opening up to her mother, learning to make small choices within her constraints, the Scotland trip and all the people she had met. Each experience had taught her something about herself and about what kind of princess she wanted to be. Charlotte realized she would probably always struggle with the pressure of royal life. There would be difficult days ahead, moments when she felt overwhelmed by expectations and scrutiny. But she had learned that she was not powerless. She had allies who understood her struggles. She had tools to manage her anxiety. And most importantly, she had found a way to be authentic within her role. As the sun set over the Scottish Highlands, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Charlotte made a decision. She would write a letter to James when she returned to London. She wanted to thank him properly for the help he had given her. For seeing her as a person first and a princess second, she also decided she would continue finding small ways to push against the constraints of her role. Not recklessly or selfishly, but thoughtfully and strategically. She would speak up when things mattered. She would choose kindness over protocol when both could not coexist. She would be the kind of princess who made people feel less alone, because she understood what loneliness felt like. The next morning, the family prepared to return to London. As Charlotte packed her belongings, she felt both sad to leave Scotland and ready to return home. She had come to Balmoral afraid and uncertain. She was leaving with greater confidence and clarity about who she wanted to be. Back at Kensington Palace, life resumed its usual rhythm. But Charlotte approached it differently now. When Miss Henderson arrived for lessons, Charlotte engaged actively rather than passively accepting whatever was taught. When staff asked about her preferences, she expressed them instead of defaulting to whatever others thought best. When photographers captured her at events, she focused on the people she was meeting rather than the cameras watching her. One afternoon, about a week after returning from Scotland, Charlotte was walking in the palace gardens when she saw James on duty. He was standing at his post near the main entrance, back straight, eyes forward, the picture of military discipline. Charlotte walked over to him. Good afternoon, James. He maintained his formal posture, but his eyes flickered to her briefly. Good afternoon, Your Royal Highness. I wanted to thank you, Charlotte said quietly, for everything you did for me. Your kindness changed my life. James remained still, but she could see emotion in his eyes. I am honored to have been of service, Your Highness. My father wishes to speak with you later, Charlotte added. But do not worry. He wants to thank you, not reprimand you. She saw James's shoulders relax slightly. Thank you for telling me. Charlotte smiled and started to walk away. Then she turned back. James, that technique you taught me, the grounding one, I use it almost every day now. It has helped me more than you know. I am very glad, Your Highness. You have shown remarkable growth these past weeks. It has been an honor to witness. Charlotte continued her walk through the gardens, heading toward her oak tree. When she reached it, she sat on the familiar bench and looked up through the branches at the sky. She thought about the girl she had been just a few weeks ago, overwhelmed and breaking down. She thought about the girl she was becoming, still facing challenges but equipped to handle them. She was Princess Charlotte, third in line to the British throne. That would never change. The scrutiny would never fully disappear. The pressure would always be there. But she had learned something crucial. She could be both royal and real. She could follow the rules while maintaining her humanity. She could serve her role while nurturing her spirit. As she sat beneath her tree, Charlotte felt something she had not felt in a very long time.
She felt hope.
Not the naive hope that everything would be easy, but the mature hope that comes from knowing you can survive difficulties. She had faced her breaking point and come through it stronger. A butterfly landed on the bench beside her, its wings a brilliant blue. Charlotte watched it for a moment before it flew away, disappearing into the garden. She smiled. Like that butterfly, she was learning to navigate her world, finding moments of beauty and freedom even within constraints. She was learning to be herself. And that, Charlotte realized, was the most important lesson of all.